Well, good morning. I know we'll probably have a few more people that will join us in the next few minutes, but I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Debbie Durrence, and I serve as the Chief Data Officer for Gwinnett County Public Schools, a large school district outside of Metro Atlanta. And I'm excited to have a conversation with you today and share a little bit about what data science looks like in our school districts and what it looks like with our students. So I'm going to start with a quote. And while this quote is from over 20 years ago, which is before the students sitting in our buildings were even born, I really believe that we're now seeing some of the most significant changes of the revolution that Peter Drucker talks about in this quote in our schools today. The information revolution is really centered around data, its collection, storage, transmission, analysis, presentation. It's really centered around the T part of IT. But the next information revolution really asks, what is the meaning of information? And what is its purpose? And this will lead to some rapidly redefining of the tasks that need to be done with the help of information in all facets of our lives. And I think we see that today. During the pandemic, we all witnessed firsthand how technology became so profound in the changes it had in how we deliver information and understand how students are learning. These changes will likely continue to evolve as we go through the next several years and how we really approach teaching and learning for our students, and likely how education will look for them as they leave our educational institutions and move on to higher learning. And as we think about our incoming kindergartners that will be graduating in 2035, their expectations and experiences around learning will likely be vastly different than what we can even imagine today. So let's take a little bit of a step back so that we're ready to step forward. So over the last century, we've moved from something that looked quite different in education to what it looks like today. We transitioned from one-room schoolhouses with students of multiple grade levels, all in one room, shown on the left, to schools with classrooms split by grade and subject, and desks in nice, neat rows, and campuses with thousands of students in one school. You'll also notice what some may recognize as a traditional green and white grade book that was used for many years by teachers to calculate their own measures of student understanding. They kept records in that book, and for years they did hand calculations of grades, and that's just how we did business in education. Progress reports, report cards, those were all handwritten and just delivered at the end of a grading period. Across the decades, though, those decisions about student mastery often didn't have a lot of other information around them. They were made in isolation and sometimes with limited data and knowledge about the students. But as the organization of our schools have evolved and greater teacher specialization has arisen, the method for collecting and understanding student performance in classes had to change along with that. And while for most of the 20th century it wasn't vastly different than this, we know today it is quite different. So as we entered the 21st century, the acceleration of change in data, technology, and understanding grew at a rapid pace. Our ability to gather, access, and leverage data about our students has grown alongside that. That green and white grade book of old was replaced with electronic programs, first independently installed on computers, which didn't exist in many classrooms as teachers began teaching. And then eventually those programs were linked together to capture and calculate student grades and many more items. In this photo, you'll see something that resembles much more closely what we would expect a classroom to look like today, with student desks grouped in collaborative groups, as well as perhaps a smart board and other technology in the classroom that enhances what students do each and every day. We know that true student engagement comes from their collaborative work together and working through those activities. We know if the teacher's the only one working in the classroom, likely they're the only one really truly engaged in learning. So we see that education looks different, and in order to effectively meet the needs of each individual student, we need more information. That grade book is just a small piece of the information that most educators have access to today. We have to think about information like attendance, enrollment, discipline, health, past academic performance, and much, much more. Many of you probably have used at-risk calculations and early warning systems. And while we didn't call it data science, as districts across the country began to develop these tools, that's exactly what it is. While it used programming and mathematical calculations to help us have a better understanding of prediction of what might happen with students as they travel through our schools, it also required a deep understanding of what it takes to be successful in our classrooms and successful in life. And while these advances in technology allow us to have more robust, faster access to student information, it's what we do with the information that really matters. Just because a computer or a calculation can help us be faster, it doesn't eliminate that need for human engagement to understand what's really happening and why. So that's kind of a backdrop to our conversation that we hope to have today. So now I'd like to open up with a couple of questions. And as I open up with these questions, I'd love for you to put your answers in the chat so that we can really have a conversation together. So the first question is, as you think about how has student information changed during your time in education? As you've been an educator, what did it look like when you first started? And what's different today? And then after we talk about that for a moment, I'm interested in also hearing what information do you wish you had about your students? So I'll give everyone just a moment to think about how has student information changed since you entered education, and then what do you wish you knew more about today and why? And I know as I began my career in education, we didn't have computers for educators to use. All of it was kept in permanent records. And I see that Jay has jumped in and said, I wish I knew more about programming than my students. Don't we all, Jay? You know, I think that one of our challenges and opportunities as we work forward is continuing to advance our skills along with our students. And I agree, standard testing has become less prevalent. I think we're recognizing that understanding what students know and can do is a lot more than just a single measure. And so we have to think about that over time. And it does, I agree, Alicia, seem to be that there's more of an effort to offer student perception surveys, understand what students are thinking, and really giving them a multitude of ways to let us know where they are and what they need. And I'll give you a couple of things that, you know, as an example. So let's say that in your school district, you know, you have a student who, you know, in your class has scored above a 90 on every assessment in your class. They've done exceptionally well, but they're also showing as an at-risk student based on their course performance because their overall average is a 70. That early warning system doesn't know that perhaps that student has been absent and not been able to turn some things in. Perhaps you're working on that student to have additional opportunities to demonstrate mastery. And so while our tools can help us, we know that we need that educator engaging in the work to better understand. And I agree, you know, having time to learn, Rachel, the programs that the kids are working on does help us. And Holly Lynn, I think that you have really hit on one of our key opportunities and challenges is having that real-time information to let us know in the moment while you're instructing and while students are working through things exactly where they are, to let us know where are they stuck, where are things going well, and what are some of their successes. So let's keep thinking, and what I'd like to do is to move on to really thinking about, so what are those skills that we know make success as a data scientist? So we know it's a combination of different things, that data science for us can be a revolution for creating an exciting time in our teaching. And that data science instruction can really help us develop students that not only are effective creators, but also effective consumers of the information. And, you know, as many of our students would tell us, they can already Google a lot of the answers that they think they need in their classes. So we're in a place where we can really use data science to help be a vehicle so that we can educate students to go from what they know to how to use what they know. So again, you know, while this seems like a revolution today, we know tomorrow's coming quickly, which will bring change along with it. So let's think about a revolution from the past and what we might learn from that. So let me step back a little bit in time. So when we think about another revolution, let's say the printing revolution, when it started to happen, it immediately created this new unprecedented class of information technologists. Kind of hard to think about printers as information technologists, but stay with me for just a minute. So just as the most recent information revolution involves data science and creating any number of different positions, information businesses, chief data officers, and others, the IT people of the printing revolution were our early printers. They didn't exist before, and it wasn't even imagined that you could share information that way. In the mid-1400s, they flourished throughout Europe for about 25 years. They became great stars. They were courted by kings, princes, the Pope, and those rich merchant cities, and showered with honors and money, just as we know data scientists are courted today. But by the late 15th century, as technology grew, they became just ordinary craftspeople as publishers in the industry continued to grow. And we want to make sure we're positioning our students not to become the modern day printers, but to become those that can continue to evolve and change and meet the needs of data as it grows over the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of their working lives. And so this Venn diagram really shows at its core that it's the intersection of math, programming, but also the ability to have understanding in a particular domain and critical thinking. So how do we package all of that, and what does it really mean for our work, both as we use data science in our classrooms, but also prepare our students? So when you think about data science and the divide, many people, when they think about that data science, they really think about those math skills and programming and particular languages that students would need to learn, or tools they should become proficient in. But that's just half the story. You can see that these skills only get you so far, because we really need to understand what it is we're analyzing and how to critically think about those topics. For example, how would someone know how to develop a graduation predictor without knowing graduation requirements? How would we develop predictions for student success in future courses, such as things like AP Potential that College Board has had for many years, that helps us identify students that could be very successful in an advanced placement course that might not be considering it today? They would need to know the content and the prerequisite skills to be successful, not just the math and the programming to build the program. So fields and concepts that we don't yet know will likely emerge over time, and we want to make sure that our students understand how to use these competencies together so that they're well positioned for their future. So let's pause for a minute and think about a couple of other questions. As we think about these, I want you to think about how can we help our students develop those data science skills we know they'll need, and also help them to be effective consumers of data science, to ask those critical questions. So let's take a minute to think about that, and then we'll dig into how do we see data science changing education as we step into the future. So we know that often for our students, we want to make sure that they're getting opportunities to dig into their work, to experience it, to understand it, and that giving them problems that they have an opportunity to collaborate and work through is something that I think will bode well for them as we think forward. We also want to make sure that they can analyze how they could take a new scenario and apply something they've learned in the past. Daniel, I agree, showing them that we're also willing to learn new things that may be daunting to us too is important for students. They need to see that as adults in the classroom, that there are things that we have to work through right along with them. And I agree, Rachel, that STEM classes that bring together those different areas have become increasingly important and give students that opportunity to dig in to problem solving, to have that opportunity to really experience their learning, and to be willing to say, I'm not sure, does anybody else know? And I think, I wonder, and to experiment and to let them know that we learn so much more when we're not successful the first time than perhaps if we are. And so the other thing I would want us to just think about as we step forward is, as data science comes further and further into education, we want to think about how it can help us in education, help us to know our students better, help us to guide them better, help us to make those individual opportunities available so that they can reach their full potential as they think forward into the next decades ahead. And so I know we just have a couple of minutes left. So I do want to open it up if there are any questions. I do have my contact information listed here. And I know that the goal for all of us is to prepare our students for the future that is yet unknown. But by being data scientists ourselves and being willing, as Daniel said, to dig into things that might be daunting at first, we know that we are giving our students the fundamentals of what they need to know and be able to do as they're successful, leaving our doors into whatever their future might hold for them. So I appreciate the opportunity to share with you. And as I said, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have in the last couple of minutes. I see a question. Thank you for sharing. So my role is the Chief Data Officer. So I have responsibility for all of our student data, the analytics and reporting, as well as data integration for our district. So what that looks like is I have teams of developers, of data scientists, of those that are what we would call data wranglers, as well as those that have responsibility for capturing and reporting all the information we have in the school district. And we provide those resources for our schools, teachers, and leaders, as well as our parents and students. Becky, I agree. I think that, it's hard for us to think about all those different intersecting opportunities we have, but the more that we can connect those ideas, it will help us in the future. I hope that everyone has a great rest of the conference, and I am looking forward to learning from each of you as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.